Good evening from Washington. I'm Larry O'Connor, and coming off of this weekend, we had more revelations in the growing scandal surrounding Joe Biden and his haphazard handling of classified documents. What's the latest, and where will the investigation lead? Let's bring in former Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, host of Liberty and Justice, found over at Whitaker.tv. Thanks for joining us, Matt. Good to talk with you.
Hey, Larry, good to be with you.
Some fundamental questions that leave me scratching my head on this thing. First and foremost, why is it that the president's lawyers are the ones who are searching through his home, his rooms, his paperwork to find if there are classified documents? First of all, they have a vested interest in protecting their client. Also, I'm told some of these lawyers they don't have security clearance. So if they stumble upon a classified document, they shouldn't be looking at it. This seems rather irregular, especially compared to an FBI raid in the home of former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, if you compare and contrast those two circumstances, Joe Biden is getting treated much different than former President Donald Trump. First of all, it's very clear to me that these documents and the discovery of these documents was never planned to see the light of day, that this was being controlled, and that somehow CBS News got a hold of it and went with it. And you've just seen how this perfectly controlled and explained initial finding at the Penn Biden Center has now spun out of control, where they're finding documents almost every day at now 3 locations. There may be more, but still no FBI raids, still no documents on the floor, photographs. It's just an entirely different treatment of President Biden, and really it demonstrates, I think, to a lot of people like myself, the two-tiered system of justice that we've been complaining about for the last 5 years.
But you're a former acting attorney general, you're a former U.S. attorney, you know how these things are supposed to happen. As soon as Merrick Garland named a special counsel, shouldn't that have activated some kind of lockdown of these rooms, these buildings where these documents might be? Why is it still Biden's attorneys who are able to access this, and we don't have anybody from the Justice Department?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And what were they looking for in the first place? I mean, we were told that they were moving out at the Penn Biden Center, and I guess that was originally acceptable. But then why would you go into a box that you're going to move, pull out an envelope that is marked personal, and pull those documents out, and then discover that there is classified information in that folder if you're just moving somebody out of an office? And so I look at that explanation as probably not the truth. And then really the question, Larry, that I think you have to really answer before we can comment as to the intent here of Joe Biden of possessing these documents is, what was in those documents? We're told they're about Ukraine, Iran, and other very sensitive topics, but were these relevant to his life? Were these relevant to maybe Hunter Biden? Were they assessments of Hunter Biden's exposure?
Right.
These questions have to be answered. We have, really, as it relates to the Trump case, we know everything that needs to be known about those documents and their contents. We don't know anything about Joe Biden's documents, and that's going to tell us a lot going forward.
The person who will be asking those questions and hopefully getting the answers to those questions from the Justice Department, at least, your special counsel, Hur. And you were sort of in the orbit of the Justice Department when Mr. Hur was brought in to replace Rod Rosenstein. What do you know about him, and do you have faith that he's going to act in the appropriate way to get to the facts? He's being called a Trump appointee, and I don't know what that means exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no doubt he had a very close relationship, and still does, with the former Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. And, when I joined the Department of Justice as Chief of Staff, Rob was down in the DAG's office as the Principal Assistant Deputy Attorney General, what's known as the PAYDAG, which is actually a very important role. And then ultimately he became the U.S. All of that because of Rod's recommendation. So, while the President Trump did appoint him, and so he certainly could be considered a Trump appointee. I think, I wouldn't take that to mean that he's a right-wing ideologue by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he's a smart lawyer, well-trained, and the proof will be on how he handles this case.
A lot of people are citing the federal law that covers the handling and possession of classified documents. Ironically, it's the exact same law that James Comey decided to ignore when it came to Hillary Clinton's handling and mishandling of classified documents. At that time, FBI Director Comey cited intent as the reason why there shouldn't be any sort of prosecution of Hillary Clinton. Is that a valid excuse here? I mean, when I read the law, it doesn't sound like intent has anything to do with whether somebody has violated this law or not.
Yeah, it doesn't, and it does. I mean, obviously, if you're going to take a case and charge a case, you need to tell a story to the jury, and the jury has to take the facts, apply the law, and then determine whether a law has been violated. There's two issues I think that are cutting against the prosecution of Joe Biden, and that is one is it's very clear that the Department of Justice's opinion is you can't indict a sitting president, and so you'd have to at least wait till he was done being president. And then the second thing is you have a statute of limitations issue. If you remember, you point to the Hillary Clinton case, there was a statute of limitations that was ticking from the time she had left as Secretary of State. Mm-hmm. And so, the question is when would these prosecutors determine that the statute of limitation, which is 5 years in this case, would run against Joe Biden? I think the prosecutors in both this case and in the President Trump case are going to have to discuss, to your point, that legal standard and what is the law. Is it as Jim Comey described, or do they have a different standard that they're going to apply to both the presidents?
Of course, if in fact these documents, which we don't know, we're speculating, but those documents do relate to Hunter Biden and the ongoing investigation of Hunter Biden and may shed light on Biden's relationship with China and Ukraine, then potentially you've got an obstruction issue here that goes beyond the classified documents. All of this could be sorted out through a congressional investigation. James Comer at Oversight, Jim Jordan at Judiciary, they're instigating those investigations. If you were advising them on where they should be looking and what they should be doing, what would you tell them?
Well, I would start asking for documents. I would start asking for witnesses, and then determine whether or not the excuse that this is a ongoing investigation is true, because they have, they've really hired some important staff in the majority in the House, and I think those experienced staffers are going to be the ones that ultimately peel back this onion. And you remember the other thing, I guess, as we go back to the difference between Biden and Trump is that Joe Biden didn't have any ability to declassify these documents. Donald Trump absolutely had the constitutional right to declassify documents, and I think that's where Special Counsel Jack Smith in the Trump case is going to have a very difficult time trying to prove any kind of violation of law based on that.
This, though, Matt Whitaker, brings us back to something you talk about quite a bit on your Liberty and Justice show at Whitaker.tv, and I think part of what Jim Jordan wants to investigate with regard to where the Justice Department is right now, and that is this feeling from the American people that there are two different paths of justice here, depending on what side of the political aisle you're on. This is a great opportunity to actually clarify that and let the American people know that justice is blind, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, I think that's what forced Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel. I don't think there was a need ultimately to appoint a special counsel in the Donald Trump case. We saw the January 6th committee, which is one of the subjects of that investigation, essentially never lay a glove on Donald Trump and the responsibility and the Department of Justice certainly hasn't charged anybody with conspiring with President Trump. In fact, every chance they did, they pulled that punch. And so, I just think he had to appoint the special counsel. It was unnecessary in the first place, but as soon as this came up, and politically, while there are differences and distinctions, Larry, these cases, to the American people politically appear the exact same.
Matt Whitaker, thanks for joining us and getting us up to speed on this developing scandal. The walls are closing in on Joe Biden. More to come on O'Connor Tonight.